Just wanted
Sounds
to
good.
let council know that, so if there's any questions on it. Questions for the council too, Mike, before we get going? Brandy?
With the Myrtle Street, talks about utilities, will there be any recommendation for any sewer, sanitary sewer to be constructed along with that?
Yeah, it would be all underground utilities, so right now we have, well, I think I might, if I have that. We have, so the park property, we do have, in speaking with the as-built drawings that the applicant's engineer had pulled up, there is a sanitary sewer line that's stubbed to the property that runs under Southview. Same with, I believe, water and storm. So there was a stormwater detention pond in the northeast corner, so there is stormwater conveyance, but really in order to serve these commercial lots, we'll end up needing to extend those mains down Myrtle. There is a sanitary sewer which ends up going through the Grove development. It's stubbed and cut off currently, probably about 30, 40 feet up Myrtle Street. So that'll end up being connected with the main that's on Southview, and so we anticipate that it's would be water and sewer that would be in the street.
Do you have a question, Ann?
Yeah, so there were a few citizens who came to the public hearing during planning and zoning, and I'm wondering, one of them asked about access to the Palouse Prairie Charter School playground, both during and outside of school hours. Do you happen to know the answer to that question at this time?
Without reaching out to the Palouse Prairie Charter School, you know, it is private property, and so they would be able to fence that location off. So usually with the Parks Department, we have agreements with like Moscow School District in order to have joint use of some of their facilities. You know, there could be some arrangement worked out here with the Palouse Prairie Charter School, but we haven't begun, you know, negotiations or any type of discussions with any type of agreement like that. So I think you just cannot assume that that is a given, that you could use, you know, the public from this area would be able to use the playground at Palouse Prairie Charter School.
That cannot be considered in the rezone and the preliminary plat either. Those are private property rights.
Okay. Any other questions for you, Brandy?
Now, I think on there you said the R2s are required to still be predominantly single-family dwellings, is that correct? Or just some portion of them?
Yeah, in the R2 zone, you're only permitted single-family dwellings.
Okay.
So they have to be single-family.
Okay, thanks for that
Yeah.
clarification. And one other question, with the pathway that's shown on there, is that kind of a part of the agreement, that little connector 20-foot pedestrian pathway? Is that a suggestion, or is that going to happen?
They're proposing that to happen, and so that was the applicant's proposal. It is shown as right-of-way, so it would be dedicated to the city, and they're showing about a 10-foot wide path that's being, you know, would be constructed there, but I'm sure those details would be worked out with the Parks Department, because ultimately, you know, it's either adjacent property owners. If it's owned by the city, then usually Parks would be the one that maintains that pathway.
Okay, thank you, Mike. I am going to go ahead and open up the public hearing. I would like to hear from the applicant, please.
Thank you. Good evening. Shelley Bennett, 213 South Main Street in Moscow. Just a couple of items that I wanted to point out to the council, and thank you for your opportunity to speak in front of you. The reason why we picked our 3 for the first 3 lots versus the R2 was, number one, it's across the street from the Grove, which is a higher density use, but it also has single-family residences above it. Primarily, the R3 zone allows a 15-foot setback versus a 20-foot setback, and the setback with these really steep lots was important. So that and the density of the neighborhood across the street from it was the primary reason for picking that zone for those 3 lots. somebody also put a bug in our ear that they wanted to come and put some affordable housing on them, but at this point, that's where we were hoping to be able to have it be where it was better buffer for the neighborhood to have the R3 on those 3 lots. The R2 lots could have been R1 because they're all large enough, but again, the R2 provides a sum of 15 side yard setbacks versus 20. And R1 is a 20-foot setback, and because of the rolling terrain, we thought it allowed more opportunity for people to site their homes, to have the R2 zone. So that's the reason why we chose those zones. We should figure out if the Palouse Prairie is going to fence their yard, and then on the final plat, we'd want to get rid of that pathway and get it to the lots, because if they're going to have a fence that doesn't have a gate, then it kind of would be silly to have that access there. So yes, it's something before the final plat we should get figured out, is if that's necessary. I wouldn't expect, and I've seen some of the plans for the Palouse Prairie School, and I see that it's laid out that I think that would be of benefit to them. And the engineer for this project, who couldn't be here tonight, is also working with the architects and the engineer from that project. So they're all working on it together, so I know the Palouse Prairie knows that this pathway is coming in. The water line and the sanitary sewer, the storm sewer are easy to get to the adjacent property. The sanitary sewer is harder to get to the adjacent property issue. I know it hasn't been discussed, and the engineer's not here to discuss it, but I know that in order for us to get the sanitary sewer all the way to the Thompsons' property and have it function for them, it's going to have to go a lot deeper than would be planned for this basic subdivision. We run into this thing at this part of town where we can sewer and water a certain amount of them, but we hit this wall right about in there, and we need water and sewer to come up from down below to make it so that that Thompson section between the Indian Hills 9th Edition and Mom and Dad's house is going to be able to get water and sewer and be developed. The sewer line, my worry is if the sanitary sewer is forced up to the property boundary, that it will be as deep as the sanitary sewer is on Indian Hills Drive, where those 2 apartment complexes got put in, which looks to me about 25 to 30 feet deep. And I don't know if the city really wants their sewer lines that deep. That's going way into the weeds. Several of the neighbors from up above Indian Hills Drive have called and asked for opportunities to hook into the sewer line down below. What the intention is to have each of those property owners that wants to be able to not have a lift or take their lifts out, to be able to use the existing easements to be able to bring their sewer down to Southview so that they can sewer it without a lift station. And those are, the Nursery Street lot just handily came in, it came in handy that it had never sold, as it was developed as part of the 8th edition, but the way it was finished, it was not optimal for development. They're redeveloping it, it'll make it much easier to be developed, and it'll have the stormwater for the whole project. And I think I have now told you everything that we had thought before. Do you have any questions for me?
I do, just in terms of the path, does it become an easement? And maybe Mike, or you can answer that question. I just don't understand what you said. And
It'll be an easement. The public path would be an easement between those 2 parcels.
it's going to become public. Easement.
Right.
Okay.
It would be a public right-of-way, I think is what you want to know. It'll be a public right-of-way between those, such as you ran into up on Christopher's Crossing. The
Except-
pathways are dedicated to the city as city.
Oh, sure. But
Right
like
away.
you said, if they have a fence, then it becomes a whole nother thing, and then you might not need to do it. Okay, got it.
Yeah, I think it's something that would behoove us to find out that they
What's
want
more.
that, or we should try to figure out something else to do with that path. We like to put paths in and connectivity, and I think he has the right intention. I just don't know if he's figured out after the planning and zoning questioned its purpose, and would the neighbors be able to play in their playground and those issues, since it is quasi-public but not fully public school. We couldn't answer those questions.
Okay, Shelley, thank you. Do you have a question for
I
Shelley
do.
before I go on?
When you were talking about the, some of the residents asking that were up north hooking into the sewer line.
Uh-huh.
So the ones that are just slightly west, the existing homes there that you can just see in the top corner, that are currently having to lift up, is it possible for them to go through any of the easements, or is that too far?
I don't think so, because if you look along those lots, you see that there's utility easements in place on the lots from up above down, and then so that could give them the opportunity to be able to get there. And we will work with each of them and the city to make sure that we can find a way to get their sewer down there. It makes it, now that it's there, it's what they've been wanting all along, because those were really steep lots on Indian Hills Drive.
One more thing I have, just for clarification, since connectivity of the sewer and water is such a big deal, and you're talking about space and stuff, it's incumbent upon the owners to make the connection. Is that correct?
It would be incumbent upon the people that own the property up above to pay for the utility connection, yeah.
And
And the
they're
hookups,
and
so
they're
forth.
understanding possibilities of distance, and that's what you're kind of.
They know that it will cost them, that it'll be at their expense that they bring it down,
Okay.
yeah.
I have a question that's maybe for Gary.
Okay.
More, since Les isn't here, if the people from above tie in, is there sufficient capacity for them to tie in? I know there is for the new Plat, but there's sufficient flow capacity for those people to tie into the existing lines down, or the proposed lines down below?
And talking to Les and Bill Belknap, they indicated that they would have sufficient capacity. Those lots along Indian Hills Drive were approved with the use of lift stations to lift sewage up to the existing line within Indian Hills Drive. So it would be incumbent upon those property owners to be able to bring that sewage flow down. But yes, the line should be adequate to handle that, according to both
you.
Les and Bill.
Okay, Shelley?
Thank you very
You bet.
much.
I will take testimony in favor of this development. I will take any testimony on this public hearing, in favor, general, or opposed. With that, I see none. I'm going to close the public hearing at 8:42 and turn it over to council.
I don't have any questions.
Jim?
I guess I would go ahead and move to approve the proposed zoning ordinance under suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings, and that it be read by title and published by summary.
And second.
Okay, well, we'll start that. We got a motion by Jim and a second by Catherine to approve the proposed zoning designations upon the consideration of any testimony presented, and approve this under the suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings. Any questions from anybody? We'll start the roll with that.
I do, I'm
Okay.
sorry, Mayor. What does everyone think about Shelley's question with extending that sewer line in the depth? And maybe, Mike, that's for you to answer, going to the east, and does the city want that or not?
Well, the engineering department made that a condition, so obviously they
Okay.
looked at the construction drawings in enough detail in order to be able to determine whether or not that would be adequate or not, and, a worthy condition, and so that was the condition that they had recommended.
Okay.
And so they had looked at that, correct.
Thank you.
Okay. We good? Okay, everybody understands the motion. I'll start the roll with Brandy.
Aye.
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 Okay. And that creates an ordinance number 2018-5. Ordinance number 2018-5, an ordinance of the City of Moscow, Idaho, a municipal corporation of the state of Idaho, providing for the zoning of approximately 8.43 acres of property described in Section 1, Property 1 of this ordinance as moderate density, R2, and approximately .89 acres of property described in Section 1, Property Number 2 of this ordinance as medium density residential, R3, providing that this provision of this ordinance be deemed severable, providing for this ordinance to be in full force and effect from and after its passage, approval, and publication according to law. Okay, we'll go on to action number 2 of this.
Well, I'm going to jump in.
Okay.
I move that we adopt the Planning and Zoning Commission's reasoned statement of relevant criteria.
Second?
Catherine can have.
Okay, we've got a motion by Gene and a second by Catherine to accept the adopted Planning and Zoning Commission's reasoned statement of relevant criteria. I'll start the roll with Ann.
Aye.
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 Okay, the second thing is the public hearing that we just heard on the preliminary subdivision plot.
I move to approve the preliminary plat for Indian Hills 9 edition with 2 conditions recommended by staff.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion by Catherine and a second by Gina to approve the preliminary plat for Indian Hills 9 addition with the 2 additional conditions recommended by staff. I will start the roll with Brandy.
Aye.
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 Okay, and now we have action number 4.
Okay, Your Honor, I move that we adopt the Planning and Zoning Commission's reasoned statement of relevant criteria with a modification to the conditions to reflect the 2 conditions recommended by staff.
Second?
Okay, we've got a motion by Gina and a second by Catherine to approve the relevant criteria with the modification of the conditions that reflect those 2 conditions recommended by staff. I will start the roll with Ann.
Aye.
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 Okay, we're done with that. Thank you very much, Mike.
Thank you, Your Honor.
You bet.